We're now joined by David Ubben, Paul Catalina, David Smoke, 365 Sports. So, David, what was it like the last month for you?
It's been an interesting summer. It's our second, so you sort of know what you're expecting, but we've got 2 under 2, so figuring out how to kind of do this all summer has been an adventure. So we're excited for the season. It's going to be a good fall, I think.
So let me ask you this: you were on paternity leave. Who is it more healthy for that the man now has paternity leave? Because I know a guy that's in DJ does a host show up in Dallas, and he was out for a while. This is something that not everybody provides. Is it better for the husband or for the wife?
I mean, I think everybody sort of wins. I think, logistically, the first time around, as anybody who's a parent, you don't really know what you're doing. You got to sort of figure it out. And the second time, you think you know what you're doing, but then you learn that your second kid is a little bit different. So I think it's good for everybody, personally.
David Ubben, theathletic.com, with us on 365 Sports.
So, David, we've asked a couple of guests about this today, but there's talk of a possible G5 only playoff, the NIT of the CFP, so to speak. Do you think that's something they need to seriously consider and maybe do?
Well, there was so much resistance for a long time, and, Mike Oresco was kind of at the front of the line there saying no, because it further draws a line in the sand between the haves and the have-nots. We want to be lumped in with the haves, the power stick moniker that, people made fun of for a long time for the Americans. But now that you have access, I think there might be something to it. I mean, if you can make money off of it, it's probably the right thing for you. And I think there's probably money to be made off of it. I think people will watch. And I think it'll be more compelling than bowl games. And, instead of throwing 2 teams in the New Orleans Bowl, having some games, whether it be on campus or whatever, games with some stakes and, another championship to play for, I think would be an interesting product. I think there's a case against it for a lot of the reasons that Mike Oresco always had. But then I think you raised the question, too, of, well, what happens to the team that is the so-called best G5 team that gets in the playoff and, maybe gets out or whatever? Do you think about including them? I don't really know. The logistics are kind of a nightmare here, but I think in terms of pure product, I'm probably one of the sickos that would watch everything, but I'd watch every second of that. And I think there's a lot of people that probably feel the same way.
Yeah, because if you're Memphis or you're Boise State or whoever it might be, Tulane, and you get in and then you lose in the first round of the college football playoff as the top G5 conference champion, and everybody else, you made it. You made the group of five $115 million for that spot. And then everybody else keeps playing for 2 or 3 weeks. So what is that going to feel like?
Exactly. I think that's something they're going to have to sort out with all of this and try to figure out, do teams want that? Is there some sort of contingency? I mean, I don't know. These are complex questions. My guess would be that they're just excluded. It's a little bit reminiscent of, in the FCS level, the HBCUs. Like, if you win the HBCU league, you don't participate in the playoffs. You go straight to the Celebration Bowl. And the only people that are participating in the FCS playoffs are, like, HBCU schools that, didn't win their league. And it's always struck me as kind of an odd thing, an odd way to set it up. And this, I think, would be kind of similar to that. So it's not perfect, but, again, I think, like a lot of things in college sports, it just comes down to, is there money to be made here? And if there is, I think ultimately you're going to see this become a reality.
David, is there a team in the rankings that you thought was overrated or underrated in the AP Top 25?
For me, I get all the cases on paper for it. I understand what there is, but do we really think Notre Dame is one of the 10 best teams in the country? I don't know. I just don't know about all that. I need to see a little bit more. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they prove that they are. They're going to have to schedule the ability to do that. But if you lose, to A&M, pretty early out of the gate there in week 1, that's I don't know about that. NC State, I think, also is a team that jumps out to me that, I don't know that I'm buying the Grayson McCall, Robert Anai marriage there. As far as underrated, I think there's a lot of upside for Tennessee. I think there's a lot of upside for LSU. Those teams are kind of hovering around that 15 mark, and K-State I think really intrigues me in the Big 12 as well, and Kansas too. So I think of that group, I'd probably say LSU has the most interesting upside to me. I think they're going to fix that defense with Blake Baker, and I think Garrett Nussmeier is a really, really good player, and Joe Sloan, their new OC. There's a big reason why Jaden Daniels became what he came. So I think there's a lot of upside there in terms of a team that's probably underrated for the Tigers.
Explain to me, if you don't mind, what you think the identity is of the Big 12.
I think, it's fun. Like, it's good football. Like, yeah, are these going to be the best teams in the country? I don't think you have to even make that case. But they're good teams with good players. And I do think there is real value in, you look around at the Big Ten, there's only like 5 or 6 teams. And that's a marked difference from the past, and only because of the expansion that can really compete there. And the SEC, this is sort of a more open year than a lot of years. But the Big 12, I mean, there's like a dozen teams that you could say could realistically win like 10 games and are going to go into the league, into the season feeling like they can. And that's pretty, that level of parity I think is really interesting. I mean, this is going to be just a fist fight every single week. And again, it's good product, it's good teams and good players. And I think that's a pretty big selling point for the Big 12. I think that's the identity for the league. Is there's a lot more parity in this league, and I think you're going to see a lot more diversity of champions than you will have seen, even in the future Big 12 and future SEC.
The Big Ten in particular, I think that's got to be a selling point for the Big 12 against them. Is the Big Ten, even with 18 teams now, is not going to cycle through as many champions. I mean, Ohio State is still going to be in that conference, and they've won it pretty much. Them and Michigan have won it pretty much every year except for a couple. The Big Ten and ACC are more similar than, say, the SEC and Big 12 are, in that there's more diversity in the champions than that, and SEC and Big Ten really just kind of, or ACC and Big Ten kind of just rotate between a couple of schools.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, you look at the new Big Ten, obviously Oregon's going to be a factor this year. We'll see what Jed Fish does and what Washington becomes. We'll see if Lincoln can kind of get USC off the mat. But, at the end of the day, you're still talking about 4 or 5 teams. So I'm with you on that. And I think this league is going to be, I think, the most fun league from week to week, because you have, you're going to have the champions, going on the road, to a team that's in like 10th place, and they might be like a 1 or 2 point favorite. Mm-hmm. And that's not really something you see in the other leagues. And I think that there is some value in that. And I think the league's going to lean into that. And in terms of identity, I think that's clearly what kind of separates them from a lot of these leagues. If you see a team like Ohio State or Georgia lose, it feels like a tectonic event. If you're seeing a team that's, a Utah or an Oklahoma State or a Kansas State, and that list of championship contenders is going to change from year to year. If they go on the road and lose, it's going to be like, yeah, that's just sort of another week in the Big 12.
So if you look at those who right now appear to be in position to be the best, or at least some of the favorites to play for the Big 12 title, and there's maybe a list of who we kind of see in 3 or 4 different categories. Who do you feel like is getting some love that might disappoint? And anybody at the bottom feeders that get thrown into that group of BYU, Houston, Cincinnati, Baylor, Arizona State, can any of them surprise people?
Well, I mean, Utah and Kansas have had so many issues with their health at the quarterback position that if that becomes an issue again, if Cam Rising is not 100% or bangs up his knee again, if Jalen Daniels, who I think as a case is the most electrifying player in the league, if those guys are not suited up for 12 games, I think that, reality can hit those 2 teams in a hurry, despite all the other things that those programs have going for them. As far as teams down at the bottom, I don't know that I see a ton. I think BYU is sort of a question mark for me in a lot of ways. We'll see what Cincinnati has. I really like Willie Fritz long term at Houston. What he inherited, I think we'll sort of see. I like what Kenny Dillingham is doing at Arizona State, but they're digging out of a pretty big hole there as well. So, once you get past like Texas Tech and TCU, I'm not a big believer in Colorado's upside. I think it's hard for. I hear a lot of people talking about them winning 8 or 9 games. I'm not so sure that I see that. I feel like 7 kind of feels like a little bit of the ceiling for me. But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of teams that are going to be kind of wild cards this year. But in terms of those teams that I think can be movers, I think I point to that Utah and Kansas just because the health of the quarterback spot has been such an issue for them. And there's no Jason Bean, there's no pig farmer left for for Utah. And I think as far as upward mobility, I find it hard to believe Houston's going to finish in 15th personally.
How long would I have to stump for you to believe that UCF could win this league?
Not very far. Not very far at all. If you can improve the defense, that's the first step. I think they definitely have upgraded at quarterback. KJ Jefferson, I think because of what happened to him at Arkansas with the Dan Enos misstep last year that Sam Pittman corrected mid-season, I think KJ Jefferson's stock is really one that is probably undervalued, not only across the country, but even in the Big 12. It's because he was so average-looking last year. And that's just not something that you sort of are used to seeing with him. I mean, he's been a great, great player throughout his career. He's played a ton of football, and he's a really good fit for Gus Malzahn's system down there. And you pair him up, with R.J. Harvey, that's a team that can really I think they've got a lot of upside in the league. So you don't have to talk to me for too long, if you want to talk about UCF. I think obviously the defense has got to be fixed first, but offensively, I think they're going to be able to put some points on the board.
Who is more of an intriguing story? I think this might be an easier question than I'm asking, but Lance Leipold or Chris Kleiman?
I have to go for Lance Leipold just because I think Chris Kleiman inherited a pretty good situation compared to certainly the one that Bill Snyder inherited, centuries ago.
Yep.
But for a long time, the question was, can Kansas ever get out of this insane
spiral
hole that the program had dug that just seemed to get deeper and deeper and deeper? And some of the scholarship changes and roster management, that did help Kansas because they were playing so far below their scholarship limit for so long. When they had Les Miles, when they had Charlie Weiss, and when they had David Beatty and all those things. But Lance, he turned them from really unwatchable for a really long time into, win or lose, even last year, the year before, and I think certainly this year, win or lose, Kansas is one of the most fun teams in the Big 12. Jalen Daniels, the fact that Kansas has the player that I think you can make the case as the most electrifying player in the league, that is not something that Kansas has been able to say, maybe ever. Going back to Todd Reesing, who was sort of a forgotten man in a really impressive group of quarterbacks in that late kind of 2000s there. So I would probably say Lance Leipold just because he did what a lot of people seem to think was impossible, which is dig Kansas out of the hole and not even really just make them respectable, but that's a good football team right now.
Yeah, it is, and the way he's done it, we had him on during Big 12 Media Days, and he seems like he's got that look of anger, or just grouchy, but he has a tremendous sense of humor. He was fantastic. So you can kind of see where he's the lovable, and yet, I'm not saying players coach, but he's got that lovable side that maybe sometimes people don't get to see.
Well, I think if you have such a tradition of winning, I don't care what the circumstances are or where you do it or how you do it or whatever. If you can consistently win anywhere, that's really, really hard to do. And Lance Leipold has done that. Obviously he did that at Division II, and now he did that at Buffalo. And that is not the easiest thing to do. And so for you to have that kind of sustained success, they seem to know what they're doing. And so I love that hire for Kansas. I thought Kansas could have hired Willie Fritz, 5 or 6 years ago. But when they hired Lance Leipold, I was like, first of all, it's amazing that they got him, and I think he can really do some stuff. And he's exceeded even, the biggest expectations.
Is there anybody that has more, at least immediate pressure on him to win of a new coach than Kalen DeBoer at Alabama?
Nope. That is going to be a thankless job. I mean, coaches in the coaching fraternity have been talking forever about, not wanting to be that guy that follows up Nick Saban. And Kalen DeBoer can talk about, well, I'm not scared of it. I'm not scared of it. I'm not scared of it. I want to embrace that. But there's not a lot of places where you can win 9, 10 games and people are still going to be grumbling. That's a short list of places, and he's at one right now. So good luck to him. I mean, I think he's a really, really good football coach. I think it's going to be a situation with a lot of unique challenges. But if you do win 9 or 10 games, that's a pretty good year at a lot of places, even places in the SEC. And at Alabama, you're going to be compared to an impossible standard because you're replacing the best that's ever done it.
Yep. Don't be the guy that replaces the legend. Be the one that replaced the legend. But I think it's great that he's taking it head on. Hopefully, he'll have a very successful season. David, welcome back. I know you. What's the next thing you have on your writing column, or what you have a topic?
Well, we've got. I'm going to be taking over the full-time hosting duties for Until Saturday, our cultural podcast. We'll be writing a bunch of stuff coming up. I'm going out to Boulder for Colorado's season opener, and then I think I'm going to Nebraska week 2 for their second game, and so I'll be keeping an eye on Dion early in the season, and then we'll see what happens. But we're going to be doing plenty of stuff this year, so I'm excited for getting to the fall and kind of getting my feet underneath me after a summer away.
It's good for you to be back, and good luck with the little ones. Thanks for your time. David Ubben, the Athletic.com, covering college football with us on 365 Sports.